Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Money Talk Tuesday. My name is Sarah Safi, and I'm a program assistant with the Office of Economic Empowerment. And today's topic will be housing rights in Massachusetts. Before we get into the main presentation, I will just tell you a little bit more about the Office of Economic Empowerment. Then we will go over some Zoom housekeeping. Then we will have our main presentation with the Attorney General's office. And finally, we will conclude with a Q&A. So the Office of Economic Empowerment is a department within the Office of the Treasurer and Receiver General of Massachusetts, tasked with supporting, advocating, and facilitating policies that empower all Massachusetts residents. Our programs serve women, families, high school students, veterans, and seniors. Our priorities include financial education, closing the race and gender wage gap, racial equity, college affordability, and promoting STEM education. As you may have noticed, this is a webinar and not a meeting, so you won't be able to view the other participants. If you would like to communicate with myself or the other panelists today, you can use the chat feature. Otherwise, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function and we will get to your questions at the end. Once the webinar concludes, a brief survey will pop up on your screen, and we kindly ask that you fill it out as it helps us improve this program. So we are launching the second cohort of the Worth and Wealth seminars in March, and registration is currently open, and these sessions will cover personal finance and economic justice topics, such as financial mapping, planning for retirement, starting your business, and salary negotiation. If you would like to learn more about this program, you can go to worthandwealth.org, and the registration as well as the website will be both linked in the chat. If you would like to attend any future Money Talk or any virtual webinar that OE is hosting, you can visit this link, which will also be included in the chat. To explore other financial topics relevant to your life, you can visit myfinanciallifema.org, which is an online resource that OE offers. And finally, for any questions or feedback, you can email us at moneytalk@tre.state.ma.us. That concludes my portion of the presentation. I will now turn it over to Jarleni Spiaman and Grace Hollander for their presentation from the Attorney General's office.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and the rest of the team from the Office of Economic Empowerment. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Jarleni Spiaman, and I am the Outreach Director in the Community Engagement Division. And I'm also joined by my colleague, Grace Hollander, who's going to be giving you a little presentation of introduction regarding our office and how we can help you throughout the services that we offer. And then we will talk about today's presentation on landlord-tenant rights. So without further ado, I'm going to give the platform now to my colleague, Grace.
Hi, hello, everyone. Just to give a quick summary of the work we do at the Attorney General's office. Let's see, we should be able to get to our next slide there. The Attorney General's office is an advocate and resource for all residents of Massachusetts. Our current Attorney General, Maura Healey, is the chief lawyer and law enforcement officer for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We aim to protect all residents and become an advocate and resource by protecting consumer rights, combating fraud and corruption, investigating and prosecuting crime, protecting the environment, workers, and civil rights. This is done in 4 key areas. First being investigations. Investigations are conducted when we receive consumer complaints, civil rights complaints, complaints from the community. We then monitor businesses and organizations across the Commonwealth to protect consumers whose rights may have been violated by these businesses or organizations. Next, enforcement. The AG's office can take legal action where we see fit to enforce the laws that have been set in place to protect Massachusetts consumers. Prevention. This is what we're all here for today. The Community Engagement Division was created in 2015 to help increase public knowledge of their rights and resources. As we all know, knowledge is power. Know your rights and know how to protect yourself. Lastly, policy. It's important to note that the Attorney General's office does not actually create legislation. However, we do have divisions within our office that work with legislators all across the state to create policy that'll best protect consumers. Where are we located? We try to be as accessible as possible with 4 main locations all across Massachusetts: Boston, New Bedford, Springfield, and Worcester. However, at the moment, we are currently operating remotely, but we do have our hotline, which is available Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's multilingual, or you can file a complaint online at mass.gov. Quick disclaimer, all the information and content that you will be given today is for informational purposes only. The Office of the Attorney General's Office is not able to give personal legal advice, but is able to provide you with what your rights and resources are. And this training today will contain third-party links. We are not able to recommend or endorse those. However, they are for your convenience as attendees. Without further ado, I'll hand it back over to Yarlenis.
Thank you so much, Grace. With today's presentation on landlord and tenant rights, you're going to be hearing about the responsibility of both the landlord and the tenants at the start of your tenancy, what you should expect. As well, we'll talk a little bit about the security deposit, the process of eviction, as well as the available rental assistance programs that are available to you. And we will finalize the presentation by giving you some more resources and our hotline numbers if you need to call, or your clients as well as providers. So with the first question is, how does it work? What is the most important information that you should know? There are 2 types of tenancy. So if you are either a future landlord or you are a tenant right now, you have the option as a tenant with a tenancy at will. If you have a tenancy at will, a lot of times people know this type of tenancy as a verbal agreement. Why? Because sometimes it's not a written agreement. It lasts as long as both parties wants to do business together. But the most important information regarding this particular type of tenancy is that the rent can change within 30 days notice. So it's not a consistent rent. So the landlord could change it as long as they give the tenant 30 days notice. With the tenancy based on a lease, this is particularly a written lease and lasts as a specific amount of time. So for example, if your lease is for 1,200 for 1 year, it will be 1,200 the entire year. It will never change. It will stay the same throughout the period. Now, when your contract ends, then the landlord can decide to raise the rent or not. But the most important particular information that you should know regarding this particular type of contract is that the lease rental stays the same. With the obligation of the landlord and the tenants, let's talk a little bit about the tenant. Especially now with the pandemic, it has been so many changes. Many people have lost their jobs. There's some financial hardships. They are available rental assistance, especially because one of the most important information and responsibility is that the tenant has to pay the rent. And if they cannot do it during this pandemic time, there are resources available for rental assistance. And I'll talk a little bit about that prior to the end of this presentation. But the tenant always has to follow the rule agreed upon with the landlord and accept the responsibility for the damages beyond the normal gear and tear. And I'll talk a little bit about that phrase, especially when we talk about the security deposit. If there's a particular damage in the property, before then, if the landlord has to fix the issue, and what are the steps when we talk about this particular phrase, and I'll do it in the next coming slides. But with the landlord, there are 2 major responsibility and obligations that person had to abide. They have to provide an apartment that is safe, clean, and in compliance with the sanitary code. And I'll talk a little bit about the process of the sanitary code and live up to the promise that made in the lease rental agreement. So for example, one in particular issues that we see and complaints in our office is that the landlord can be in violations of the contract if they enter the apartment without the authorization of tenant. There are 2 instances that specifically one instance that the landlord can enter the apartment without the authorization of the tenant if it's like an emergency, for instance. But they do, if they have to fix anything within the inside that apartment of the household, they have to get authorization from that particular tenant. And it's important that there's not any violation. And if you notice there is a violation, you can always call our office and we can give you a referral to an attorney if you need one, or a legal aid agency as well, because there are the resources there that we do give referral if you need. As my colleague Grace mentioned, because we are a law enforcement agency, and by law in our office, we cannot give any legal advice to represent an individual, but we do have resources that we can share with you to give you referrals to places that can assist you if you are in need of any type of legal representation. So what do you need to know at the start of the tenancy, especially if you're thinking to be a landlord? What are things that you can include at the beginning to let that future tenant know? And if you are a tenant right now that is looking for an apartment to move, a lot of time the landlord will ask that tenant for the first and last month of rent, as well if you need to the money for the cost of a new lock or key for the apartment, and the security deposit. And I'll talk in the next slide about the security deposit, because the security deposit cannot exceed the amount you're going to be paying monthly. So if your rent is $1,200, that particular landlord cannot ask for a security deposit of $1,500. It has to be $1,200 or less. So that is very important. And if you are right now a tenant that are paying in cash, or if you have a client that they do pay in cash for the to the landlord, it is important for you to know that the landlord do have to provide a signed receipt of any payment that is made in cash or through money order. And the receipt must include in detail the amount that is paid and the date that it was made, as well as the description of what it was for. So if it was for to pay the rent, they have to make sure that they include that in the receipt. And it's very important, if you are a person, a tenant right now that is paying in cash, it is very important that for every amount that you pay to get a receipt, because that is a proof that you are paying your rent in case you have any issues later on, or you are in the process of eviction. This is a good information and documentation, evidential documentation for you to have. So the security deposit, it is important for you to know that if you give a security deposit, it's only for one time. It's a one-time payment. If somebody asks you, if a landlord asks you to give 2 security deposit for that apartment, they can be in a violation, and you can call our office to report that. But it is a one-time payment for security deposit. And as I mentioned before, the security deposit cannot exceed what you're paying monthly for rent. So given that the tenant, when you are giving as a tenant the security deposit to the landlord, that landlord has to provide the tenant the name and the address of the bank holding the security deposit and the account number. All that bank information that landlord has to provide for you. Even if you are paying in cash and you have to give a security deposit because you're paying cash, you have to be provided that information. And each year in that account, it will generate interest. And then the landlord could deduct amount from the payment, or if you have to move out of the property, they can give you all the accumulated interest that you have accumulated throughout your tenancy, that particular money amount. But as well, the landlord, when you first start to rent an apartment, and when you first move in, the landlord has to provide you as the tenant a statement of condition. This is a documentation which describes the condition of the apartment and any damages that exist at the time. So when I mentioned the phrase at the beginning, beyond the damages beyond the normal gear and tear, this is what I mean. If you notice at the beginning a damage or a hole in the wall, you should write it down in that statement of condition. Why? Because when you're moving out of that property and that the hole is still there and wasn't fixed, the landlord cannot say you have to pay for that particular damage because it was already there at the start of the tenancy. And that's why it's important for you to be given that documentation, for you to document any damages that you see in that property that might have to be fixed at the time being, or that you should just have it so later on it won't compromise you as a tenant. But it's important when you are giving that statement of condition, as a landlord has to give the tenant the statement of condition within the 10 days of beginning that tenancy. And then the tenant can return back that statement of condition within the 15 days. So there are a time period when you're supposed to receive that statement of condition. And as I mentioned, if you have to leave the property because you want to rent somewhere else, It is important that if there's nothing that has to be fixed in the apartment, the landlord has to return the security deposit plus the interest if they haven't deducted from your monthly rent within the 30 days of the tenancy ending. And all that information, we have a booklet as well that we have that information on our page 7 of our Landlord-Tenant Rights, and I can share the link for you to have if you want to share with other people this information that is so important, as so many tenants are not aware of this particular information regarding the security deposit. With the statement, when we talk about the sanitary code in Massachusetts, it is just very important for you to know what is the sanitary code. The sanitary code in Massachusetts requires that a place is habitable, comfortable, and clean enough for a person to live safely. So for example, let's say right now the heat in your apartment is not working, you are 65 living, or you have a minor in that apartment during the winter time right now, for example, and that particular is not, those particular heatings are not working. It can be a violation if your landlord doesn't fix it, because we do need the heat to stay warm throughout the winter season. So this is the particular example of a violation of a sanitary code. So what happens? What are the steps that you have to take? First and foremost, you have to notify your landlord right away about this particular issue. Now, if your landlord doesn't fix it, it's important for you to know that you have another step that you can take as a tenant. You can report it to your city or town that you're living in, and you can report it, and your city or town will send an inspector to inspect the place. And if your landlord does not fix the violation of your household, then that city or town inspector can fine your landlord until they fix that issue. The last step that you can take as a tenant, if the landlord fails to fix the problem, then you can withhold portion of your rent or move out. But it's important for you to know this, that if you are trying to take step number 3 to hold portion of your rent, we do advise for you to make sure to talk to either a private attorney or a legal aid agency regarding the steps of what you can do if you're trying to withhold portion of your rent. And if you do need some type of representation, you can always call our office and we can give you the referral to the nearest cities to you that you can call right away to get that legal assistance, in particular for those particular legal questions. But it's so always important that for you to make sure you talk to an attorney before taking step number 3. So during the winter consideration, this is something that we want to make sure that you are aware of, either if you are right now a landlord or a tenant. During the heating season, there are some particular dates, especially if you're living in a building that you don't have control of what's the degree that you should put in your household. So it's important for you to know that during the time period of September 16 to June 14, a landlord must keep the apartment between 68 to 78 degrees between 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. And between 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., it has to be between 64 to 78 degrees. It is important to know as well that at the start of your tenancy, a lot of times the landlord will tell you what type of utilities are included. If you don't have to pay for the water or the heating, it's just an agreement that you have to make sure you have to know if you are responsible or not. And it's important for you to know that responsibility depending on the lease agreement that you have. As well, the tenant is responsible for the heating any common areas. It is not responsible for the heating of any common area of the building. And this is very important for you to know, because if you're renting an apartment that has various units within that apartment, a lot of times we have seen issues with that tenant outside of the apartment are being charged for those heating utility bills. So if you ever have issues, you can talk to the Department of Utility right away to double check to make sure that you are not paying for any common area heating responsibility, because you're not responsible for that. And if you believe you are being paid, just make sure you call. You can also call the Department of Utility, but you can also contact your city or town local inspectional services. The last information that you should know, as we are through the winter time with the snow season, what is the removal? Snow removal, if it's your responsibility. It is the landlord by law here in the state of Massachusetts. It is the responsibility of the landlord to remove the entryway that multiple tenants use. And if you want more information or any type of removal requirements, you can call the consumer hotline or the city or town hall for that information, because every city or town have different type of regulations. But this is something that you agree upon and that you are informed at the beginning of your tenancy. And this is why it's always important that even when you have, or if you have a client that is looking for an apartment and that you're going to have an agreement, please make sure to advise your client that any type of documentation that they do sign, it is important that they understand 100% what they're signing, because a lot of times, these things can compromise you if you're signing something that you do not understand. So we do advise to get the assistant if you need an interpreter or if you need the documentation translated. But it's important to make sure that you are signing those things and that you are aware as a tenant of what are your responsibility. And this is why it's always very important that we do have all this information right now in our guide as well that I'm going to be sharing, because these things do change as we are changing the different seasons of your responsibility or not. But it is also important for you to always stay in contact with your city or town too, as they have different type of regulations depending on where you live. There are some programs right now, especially if you need assistance for your heating bills. It is important for you to know that there is a program called the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, known as the LIHEAP. And this used to be known as the Fuel Assistance Program. And what it provides you is provide eligible household with the help of paying portion of the winter billing heats. And a lot of times right now, if you do not qualify for this program, you can always talk, either if you live in a town that has their own municipality, gas and electricity, or if you talk to if you have a electrical company like Eversource or National Grid, for instance, you can always talk right away if they have a budget planning to pay portion of your billing if you're having some financial hardships. But for this particular program, you can go to mass.gov and there are some information there regarding the program. Or if you need to find a provider agency, you can go to headfuel.assurewebsite.net, and it can provide you right there the list of agencies that are nearest to you, so you can apply for this program. If you want to advise a client as well that need it, please let them know that it is available for you. But please know that if you are over income and you don't qualify, you should immediately talk to your heating utility companies about budget planning, because they do have that option for you. Or even if right now you are joining us and you are a homeowner, know that's an option as well for you as well. So during the rent right now with COVID-19, what are the assistance? What are the state programs available? Most information, especially as a tenant, that you should know that if you are unable to pay your rent because you're having some financial hardships due to the pandemic right now, you should notify your landlord within the 30 days of your missed payment. And what will happen is, and what our office is encouraging, is both the landlord and the tenant to work out reasonable payment plans. And the landlord should also work with the tenant seeking rental assistance. There is a program right now known as the Rental Assistance for Families in Transition, abbreviation RAFT. And this program is a state program that provides you with some rental information assistance up to $7,000 to the families that are needed. Or if you are right now a family or somewhere who's undocumented, just know that you do qualify. There's no any type of legal status of requirements in that application. So even if you are an undocumented resident right now, you can apply for the RAP program, and you can find it on mass.gov. And this is the most important information, as I mentioned. Right now, you can receive up to $7,000 for the available back rent or future rent. And if you also need information because how to apply, because there's so many information right now that are misinformation out there. There are some administered housing consumer education centers that are regional wise throughout Massachusetts. And you can go to masshousinginfo.org and find out what organizations are nearest to you that can help you with the application. As well, we do have a link that I'm going to be sharing the next coming slides that somebody, an attorney in our office, can also send you a copy of the application if you need it for the RAP program. There are another program too, but in particular, if you are subletting right now, it is important for you to know that we do encourage consumers to avoid subletting if they can. If you are subletting, know who the person who are you renting to and who's in charge of you giving the rent to monthly, not your landlord. So you have to know right away who is the person you're supposed to pay the rent to, and make sure you know right away who they are. And if you have to apply for the rental assistance, for instance, for raft, know that benefit will go directly to the landlord, not you as the tenant in charge. So with the raft program, if you are applying, that check will go directly to the landlord, not to you as a tenant. And it's important, but there are another program that has some situation where as a tenant, you could receive the money, and it's through the ERAP. And I'll talk a little bit about the ERAP program, which is known as the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, the ERAP. And this is a federal funding program that is still new, and eligible low-income tenants who are in need of financial assistance can apply. You can also apply for RAFT, and a lot of times the representative will let you know if you also qualify for ERAP assistance. And you can get this information through mass.gov. They have all the information, all the requirements that this particular state program has, that you can know right away if you need to apply. And it's important for you to know that the state agency that are monitoring the ERAP program, the RAF program, is the Department of Housing and Community Development. And all that information, as I mentioned, you can go on mass.gov and receive it if you need further explanation of these programs. But in particular with the ERAP program compared to the RAF, that the money will go directly to the landlord. It is important for you to know with the ERAP, if your landlord, they made various attempts and your landlord is being non-responsive after 7 days of receiving a certified letter, phone calls more than 3 times, and messaging attempts, the money can go directly to the landlord, to the tenant. The money will go directly to the tenant, but also the landlord could also write a letter that they say they choose not to participate in the program, and that immediately will give the tenant a chance to receive the check money for the old rent as well. So there are options available, which, because every different programs, rental assistance programs, have different type of requirements. The last program that I want to mention is the Homeowner Assistance Fund, and this is a new program that started this year as of January. The Homeowner Assistance Fund, known as HAF. This program provides eligible homeowners who have missed about 3 home mortgage payments to help them avoid foreclosure. So if you are a homeowner right now joining us, and your application is approved, funds will go directly to the homeowner's mortgage servicing company. So whatever mortgage company that you have, the check will go directly to them. But it's important for you to know that with this particular program, you do have to miss at least 3 home mortgages payments in order to qualify. And there are other requirements with this particular Homeowner Assistance Fund, and you can go to mass.gov/how/homeowner assistance fund HAF, and you will get that information directly, or what you need if you are a homeowner right now to get that information to you. Lastly, I just want to make sure that you know that a landlord can't evict you for exercising your rights. And I'll talk right now in this particular sections about what is the eviction process, how does it look like, what are the step-by-steps, what are programs that might be available for you if you don't have any technology to attend the hearings online, and as well, what are some information that you should be aware of if you are experiencing some type of discrimination, and who you should call. I will be providing you in these sections. So right now, the eviction process it can be a lengthy process depending on the court hearing that you may have, but it usually starts with the landlord giving you a 14-day or 30 days notice to quit. It is a letter providing to you. If the landlord tells you verbally you have to leave, and they cannot harass you and tell you you do have to leave without attending a court hearing. So if they do, we have seen a lot of illegal evictions happening, and you should report it right away to our office. It is under our Civil Rights Division that takes these type of cases, and I will share the direct phone number. But I just wanted to let you know, if you are a tenant right now, that it is the court judge in the housing court that would decide if you have to leave or not the property. So usually when you receive that notice to quit letter, usually what it will happen is that the landlord will start a process. It's a civil action in the housing court, and then you will receive an important date. It is important as a tenant that you should be notified right away of that particular date, because then the landlord must get a judgment from the court, and then the judge will tell you right away if the landlord has to leave the property, or if you can get an extension, or if you don't have to leave the property. But it is the housing court that will decide the final resort of the eviction process request. And that if the tenant has to leave the property, then it is important for you to know that an officer, a sheriff, will go with you to get your belongings. But it is important as a tenant to never miss these type of dates if you have an eviction hearing, because this will give you the chance for you to raise your defense regarding the eviction. It is important that you should know as well and be aware that a lot of times, because of the pandemic, a lot of the hearings that are happening with the eviction process are online. So our office, we announced an eviction program access grant program, where the person will get the ability to go to an organization, utilize their computer if they have, because a lot of times we have seen where a lot of cities and towns have high cases of eviction where people don't have access to technology, and we wanted to make sure that you do get that access that you needed. As Attorney General Healy has mentioned, that our goal with this particular grant program is to help the tenant who are at risk of losing their home and may not have access to technology to advocate for themselves in court and safely participate in the hearings. So it is important for you to know we have been collaborating with 4 agencies to give the access to technology and the computer, and this is all free of charge. You can, if you are near Everett area, we are working with the LIHEAP Family Resource Center. If you are in Brockton area, we are working with a family center. And if you are in the Lawrence area, we're working with Centro de Apoyo Familiar, known as CAF. And in Lynn, we're working with the Lynn YMCA. So you can call if you have a hearing online and you need access to a computer to attend those Zoom hearings. You can call them. And it is important for you to call, because sometimes there might be other people utilizing the computer. So it's important for you to schedule the appointment and call them. And sometimes, a lot of times, if you are speaking another language, they do have some bilingual personnel that can help you and assist you too as well. With regarding the eviction help request, if you are a landlord tries to evict you and without a court order, or you need help applying for rental assistance, or you need a sample of the information, especially related to raft, you can go to mass.gov/form/eviction help request to get that information that you need. Especially as the raft application can be a little complicated. Please know that you can utilize our office to get the copy of that information, or the centers that I mentioned that are regional throughout the state of Massachusetts that can help you as well. One of those representatives in those agencies can help you apply and get the right application. Housing discrimination, we just want you to be aware that it is unlawful to deny housing because of a person's race, color, national origin, ancestry, gender, marital status, religion, age, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, military background, or disability. It is important for you to be aware of that, and it is important for you to know that during this pandemic times, we've seen some violations when it comes to the discrimination cases. And we want you to know that as a tenant, your landlord cannot discriminate you against because you are receiving some governmental benefits, or if you are applying for RAFT or any of the rental assistance that I mentioned, and your landlord discriminate you, they cannot do that. That is the violation, that is illegal, and you should report it to our office. If your landlord refused to accept RAFT or ERAP, or filled a portion of the application, because there are some portions in this application that your landlord has to complete, they can be in a violation of the Massachusetts law. So please know that you can report the discrimination or the illegal eviction to our Civil Rights Division at 617-963-2917, or you can file a complaint at mass.gov/AGO/civil rights complaint. But as my colleague Grace mentioned earlier, our hotlines are available every day, Monday to Friday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. We do have language access hotline, because we want to make sure that you are provided with that information and accessibility. If you're speaking another language, that you can call our office, and that you know that we do prioritize language access accessibility. We have seen an spike of housing scams still, because a lot of times scammers are right now taking advantage of the fear around seeing apartments in person. And if you cannot see a place in person, we do recommend you, and we are advising in several tips for you to avoid being scammed. So make sure that if you're looking for an apartment online, please be aware of any type of listings that are looking very easy to fake. Make sure you use a licensed real estate broker or salesperson to find a place. You can verify if that person has a broker license online, and I can share that link with you as well. Keep an eye out for any red flags, such as poorly written ads, deals that are too good to be true, any requests for payments using untraceable methods. A lot of times that particular scammer can be telling that future tenant that they should send a money order security deposit through an account. And please be aware that that is way too good to be true. That is a red flag. It's just a scammer trying to take your money very easily. Don't disclose your social security or any type of PayPal or any type of other accounts information to only a person you met online. And if you are a victim of an online scam, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, known as the FBI, is the federal agency that tracks any type of online scamming. You can go to IC3.gov to report it right away and file a complaint with the FBI. With our office, this is the other general hotline, consumer hotline that we have. The number is 617-727-8400. I repeat, it's 617-727-8400, or you can go to www.mass.gov/AGO, where you can file a complaint directly. There are some forms, and we do have it in various languages too. If you need to share with your clients that might speak other languages, we have that accessibility form translated as well. And as I mentioned, you can call us from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. every day, Monday to Friday. Now, I'm going to have Sarah to see any questions that anybody may have, so we can take it right now. And I truly thank you for being here today and joining us on today's webinar on Landlord-Tenant Rights.
Thank you so much. This was such an informative presentation, very comprehensive, and we have some questions from the audience. So the first question is, if someone with a Section 8 voucher lives in a non-smoking apartment but smokes due to an anxiety disorder, could that fall under a protected status and therefore not be subject to eviction?
So this is a really great question. What I would say, please make sure, because this could be this is kind of like a legal question. So I would say, please make sure to call our office right away, because we would advise you to either call a legal aid agency or a private attorney to talk to you about what the different steps, and to also look into the regulations of that lease contract to see if it could be a violation or not, or any type of accommodation that you may need regarding that issue. And you can call that number that I mentioned, that is the 617-727-8400.
Thank you. The next question is, can a landlord ask for additional security deposit money to match an annual rent increase?
So with the security deposit, as I mentioned, it's only one time. They cannot ask you various times. If they do, it could be a violation. You can report it right away through our Civil Rights Division. But just know, if you joined us late, I did have a portion of that. And I know Sarah will probably share with everyone the copy of today's presentation. But it is important for you to know with the security deposit, it is a one-time payment. They should not ask you multiple times. And it cannot exceed what you're paying monthly. So if your rent is $1,200, that person, that landlord cannot say that it's more than that monthly rent that you will be paying.
But if you're renewing your lease and the rent amount increases, then the landlord could ask for a higher security deposit that matches that increase?
It depends. If you are renewing your lease, maybe it will be important for you to talk to one of our person in our Civil Rights Division, so they can look over that lease contract. I would assume a lot of times, because your security deposit do increases on interest. A lot of time, if the lease didn't increase too much, it could be, the interest, depending on that time that you were there, could have accumulated it. But as long as you're paying it one time, it should be perfectly fine. If you are renewing your lease, because this is a particular question, maybe it would be good for you to talk to one of our representatives in our Civil Rights Division and to check your contract too as well. Our number to the Civil Rights Division is the 617-963-2917.
Great. The next question is, this person says that on the lease, it says there's no smoking allowed, yet the landlord is allowing it in the building. What can a tenant do about that?
That is a really great question. If they have some particular rules and, there's still some violation, I would advise you call our consumer hotline right away, which is the 617-727-8400 number. So they can direct you to an attorney. So if you need any type of representation to take any legal action because of that violation, they can advise you with that particular problem.
Great. And I see that there are a couple questions about maybe the sanitary code. One question is, what can I do if my apartment has mold and poor air quality? So if there seems to be a sanitary code violation, how do tenants report that?
This is really great. I did have a slide on the sanitary code. And one important information that you should know is that I would advise you to immediately call your landlord, let them know of the violation to fix, especially if you do have a minor in the household that is right away an emergency where they have to fix it too. But if they don't fix the issue, what I would advise you either to call your city or town local inspectional service and to have an inspector come and inspect the apartment, and the inspector would tell right away where if the landlord has to fix the issue immediately, they can fix it. And if they don't fix it, the city or town inspector will continue to fine, and there are big fines until the landlord will fix the issue.
So following that, there's a question about a landlord who is not consistently keeping the temperature at the appropriate temperature that you mentioned earlier in your presentation. Would that tenant follow the same process of getting an inspector?
Yes, you can follow the same process, just to make it quicker, because this could be this is part of like a utility heating issue. Or you can call our office too, because our office as well, we do have a mediation that we offer in our office, so we can mediate that issue with the landlord and the tenant. So you can also call our office if you need to get a quicker response and you're not getting the help that you need from the inspector services. We can be the advocate for you too through the mediation program that we have. And the direct phone number that you can call is the 617-727-8400.
Great. One person asked about raft and what if the landlord refuses to fill out raft documentation?
This is a really great question. I probably, you can see the flyer right there, the slides, but if they refuse to fill out the raft portion, they can be in a violation of the Massachusetts law, and you can immediately call our Civil Rights Division. We have dealt with issues like that, and one of our attorneys in our Civil Rights Division can help you, because this could be a discrimination case. And you can call our Civil Rights Division at 617-963-2917.
Great. As a follow-up to the questions about violations in the sanitary code, Some people are saying that they've already reported it and yet still nothing is being done in their particular living situation. So what would be the next step, even if you've gotten an inspector to come take a look at the building?
So the next step, I could advise you to also call our Civil Rights Division, see if we can help you, if you can mediate the issue through our mediation program as well. And one consumer specialist from our office can take a further action to see if you can get a quicker response or a resolution for that issue.
Great. This question came up. I think it's interesting. What is the law on tenants with emotional support animals or pets, registered, unregistered pets? And the second question is, what if the emotional support pet is listed as a dangerous breed under the home insurance policy?
So this is a really great question. So I would say give our Civil Rights Division a call, because they do work a lot of times with, if you need any type of accessibility accommodation, or, regarding if you have a dog in particular, as you mentioned. So they can take a look at that and take a look into also the lease agreement and that insurance. It could be a violation or not, and they can advise you a little better on that issue, as every time you rent an apartment, there's just different type of policy regarding that. But because the Civil Rights Division do work with accommodation in the workplace or in the household that you might be leaving off, you can call them right away and they can assist you and help you with that issue. And it's the 617-963-2917. That is the direct line to our Civil Rights Division.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Arlenis and Grace. I don't want to take up too much of your time. If any of our attendees have any more specific questions, please refer to the resources that we shared today. I will also be sending out a follow-up email, which will include this presentation, all of the relevant links and phone numbers in case you guys have more specific questions. But thank you to the Attorney General's office for collaborating with us on this event. It was super informative and we're very grateful to have shared this information with everyone. But this recording will be uploaded to YouTube and you'll get a link tomorrow in case you all want this resource in your back pocket. But thank you all again for attending. Thank you to our presenters and have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all.